welcome to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith, and this is a little bit of a different feel on a Friday. No Alan Saunders and no Derek Bell, but don't worry, not going to leave you guys hanging. We got Aaron Becker of Steelers Now joining the podcast. How we doing, Aaron?
We're doing well, man. It's Friday. We're inching closer here to OTAs, and no complaints on my end. So.
I just realized I missed an opportunity there to bring you in the same way that I texted you. I said, right now, you're my favorite AB associated with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And anybody that's a fan like myself would probably, I hope they agree that you are their favorite AB. So certainly not the one that I'm alluding to that used to play for the franchise. I think that's well beyond where the fan base is at this point. Notice his jersey is not one of the ones behind me. But anyways, missed opportunity by myself there. But anyways, Aaron, a lot of good stuff to talk about today. Honestly, feel like we should start with like the talking point that everybody wants to talk about, which is Chris Olave. A little bit of information came out there today that Steelers were, the wording can be funny with these things in terms of what was actually going on there. They've explored the idea of trading for Chris Olave. Alan Saunders of the site, obviously putting it out there. They've had preliminary discussion. I had said going back to last week that I'd heard that they've made at least a phone call to see about the availability. Now, that's literally any wide receiver the Steelers are probably calling about. So, that is why I say take it with a grain of salt when you hear that they're working on a trade, because if that's the word we're going to use anytime that they call a team to ask about a receiver, well, then they're working on about 15 trades for receivers, because that's how these things typically go. But just in terms of Chris Olave here, this is, man, what an interesting player. This whole thing is surrounding is so interesting to me, because love the player, love the skill set, automatically drop him in. He'd be a great asset, but the concussion history, obviously super scary. Lack of production last year, even when he was healthy, probably one concussion away from who knows what happens for the rest of his career. And he also, I know they picked up the 5th-year option, but he's extension eligible right now too. And you got to decide pretty soon whether you're going to pay him that bag. So what do we make of Chris Olave and the whole discussion surrounding this?
Yeah, I think, like you said, this is kind of just the Steelers doing their due diligence. There's been reports that they've contacted Green Bay about a couple of their receivers. I would be very surprised if the Steelers don't add another receiver at some point, obviously after trading George Pickens. But with the Olave chatter, it is interesting, right? He's a super talented player. He's still 24 years old. Before last season, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving years. But the injury history is there, right? I think this past year he had 2 concussions, which brought his football career total to 5. He's had 4 in the league, 1 in college of what I'm aware of. A hamstring injury, an ankle injury. But when he's on the field, he's great, right? And I think he would be an awesome complement to DK Metcalf. So there's, it makes complete sense why the Steelers kind of made that call. Now, from the Saints' perspective, I don't understand why they would trade him right now. They are entering a bit of a rebuild, I think, with Derek Carr hanging up the cleats for good. And, they have a very unknown quarterback situation there with Tyler Shuck and Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. But like I said, he's still only 24 years old. And if the Saints are kind of going to go into a rebuild here, he could still very much be in their future plans. What they would ask for is also more than what I think the Steelers would be willing to give up. I heard a little bit of chatter of a day 2 pick. Sure, they kind of threw out one of those 3 future third rounders because they have so many of them. And I think a lot of people would be more than happy to just kind of swap George Pickens with Chris Olave. But I think the Saints would probably ask a little bit more than that. So from an overall perspective, makes complete sense why the Steelers are interested in him. Great young receiver. But from the Saints' perspective, don't know why they would kind of move on from him unless he made things ugly, which I don't see any unhappiness in the ones right now from that perspective.
Yeah, this is one of those things that there's zero chance, in my opinion, of it taking place right now. Obviously, different circumstance in terms of the amount of talent on the team, but last year, how we talked about Brandon Ayuk, it's Ayuk's going to have to make this ugly through the summer to really become a trade candidate. And I think that's the same thing that would have to happen with Chris Olave in not that I'm like, I'm not in the know with Chris Olave. We're not tight. We're not boys. We don't have like mutual friends or anything like that. Doesn't seem like that type of dude. Like everybody speaks very highly about him from that standpoint. It's just kind of hard for me to envision that happening. But I mean, there's a professional way to go about obviously asking for a trade, and maybe they would be willing to go down that path if he were to do so. But I think that we're far away from that happening. But because of the other things that I said surround, it's just a hard trade to get done. Like even the parties seem motivated, what's a fair price to get back for that player, taking into consideration the talent, but then also obviously the injury history and who knows what's going to happen. And then on the contract on the other side of it, like we know the Steelers, how they protect themselves in terms of the guaranteed money in general anyway. But like, man, to structure a contract to protect yourselves against like I'm saying, and the unfortunate circumstance, like if it were to happen where he does suffer another concussion all of a sudden, like that's it, man. Like there's so many factors at play here that this is just a very hard deal to get done if it does get done.
Yeah, and like you said, just with the injuries, the Saints would be kind of selling him for a discounted price right now, just given
Yeah.
off. I think he played in 8 games this past season. I don't think that's smart business by New Orleans. I think they're very aware of that, and I probably don't think it was a very long phone call. But Steelers doing their due
Mhm.
diligence, and
So that's why I had heard that they called twice. Like one was around free agency, and then when Carr retired, they called again because they were
yeah,
curious if that would change the direction of the franchise, which certainly makes sense. So again, we'll see if anything comes to fruition. I think if it were to, this is something like we're talking about way down the road in terms of the summer and stuff. And I know fans don't want to hear that because this is just, again, not relating it 1-to-1 in terms of the Brandon Ayuk thing, but we were having the same conversation 14 months ago. Just in
yeah.
terms of the wide receiver market, we thought for a couple months after acquiring DK Metcalf that maybe we had the 1-2 at least for a season in Pittsburgh, but that's obviously not the case. Just sticking with the wide receiver stuff, though, I'll work in a question in here just because somebody actually wants to put us on the spot and make a prediction, which we will definitely do down the road here for my man Tyler. But while we're on the subject of receivers, I don't know if it's not Chris Olave. Is there another name that comes to mind for you?
That the Steelers could realistically trade
Free
for this
agency, yeah,
offseason?
free agency or trade. Like, okay, so we put out there, the site put out there, which I think we expanded upon something that was already put out there on the site. We knew that they called the Packers to ask about Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. I don't know if you felt like either one of those are feasible options or if there's somebody that's still on the free agent market, because we just talked about this yesterday during the SN Plus live stream. You looked at the free agent market. The top guys are super old, seem like they're pretty much like athletically tapped out, and their slot guys like Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, or at least better in the slot. So I don't know what's your feel just in terms of, okay, if it's not Chris Olave, one of the Packers wide receivers be in play, is there still a free agent that makes sense?
Yeah, I'll do one from each. I know General Manager Marcon has kind of expressed his confidence in this wide receiver
Sure.
group. And I do genuinely think that they want to get an extended look at them this summer before they do add to that room. I don't think that's what a lot of Steelers fans want to hear. But I do think they're intrigued by Roman Wilson going into year 2, right? Calvin Austin continues to traject upwards, right, with his
Mhm.
play. But like you said, those guys are all kind of slot guys. So in free agency, I think a guy that kind of makes the most sense would be Amari Cooper. He's proven the ability to play on the inside and outside. I think that is a very late kind of move in the summer. I think they will kind of feel out their trade options first, which I think probably would be Green Bay. But like the Steelers, I think Green Bay wants to see what their room kind of looks like this summer first. They have a lot of names, right? They drafted Savion Williams in the 3rd round. They drafted Golden in the 1st round, right? Dobbs, Wicks, Christian Watson's coming off a major injury. They also have McCole Hardman in there. So I think they are a very realistic trade partner. It's kind of just how does that wide receiver room kind of work itself out this summer? Is Christian Watson healthy? Is he able to come back the beginning of the season, mid-season? Because I think that's going to have a lot of weight on that decision to move on from one of those guys. So
Mhm.
Amari
I mean, it
Cooper, I
seems
would
like
go.
based off the timeline, I think Christian Watson might be back like a week or two before the trade deadline, and then that would
Yeah.
obviously line up for them to open something up there.
Right. And, I don't think a lot of Steelers fans want to wait that long to add
Oh,
another
sure. Yeah.
receiver once again, right? With going through the whole Mike Williams experiment last year. But, both Dobbs and Wicks are very interesting players. Dobbs going into the final year of his rookie deal. Wicks has 2 years. Kind of different players, right? So it kind of just depends, I guess, one, who Green Bay would be more willing to part with and kind of the Steelers' taste of what they're looking for at wide receiver. But Amari Cooper, I think, could be a late summer ad if nothing kind of happens there. And trade deadline, I think Green Bay makes a lot of sense as well.
He's gotten a couple free agent visits, and I was curious if Pittsburgh would end up being one of those. Gabe Davis, I understand the injury designation that he was released with, and there's obviously like some qualms there, I'm sure, but maybe that's the point. Get him in the building and these other teams getting a look at him too. But I think better fit for this offense than he is player, if that makes sense. Like I think what he does well get accentuated within this offense. Like he's a really good blocker, kind of a one-trick pony in terms of being able to be a deep threat, but that's kind of what I think that they're looking for. The hands have been inconsistent. He doesn't run every route on the tree, certainly. But I just think in terms of what we would be looking for, he could make sense. Again, he's gone on a couple free agent visits already, and the Steelers have not been one of those. So maybe that one's not in the cards. But when the Jaguars released him, I was like, oh, that one would make a ton of sense, even though I'm not like super high on Gabe Davis. I think the fit is really good. From a free agent perspective, the name that I'll throw out there that hasn't been talked about a lot, and again, like I'm not necessarily super interested in it, but it's a guy that plays outside, DJ Chark. I'll throw that name out there just because he plays on the outside and he's a free agent. Like looking at anybody else, again, I don't know if you sign somebody that's going to primarily play in the slot, or at least has recently. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but either they got to play outside, or you're asking, Calvin Austin to play outside, Roman Wilson to play outside. Is that something that they're going to be capable of doing? So I don't know. We'll see how they fill, if they were to go through free agency, how they would fill that void. I like the Packers shout still as it comes to trade. I think that just makes the most sense as a logical trade partner. And I think if you're looking at them, I would lean towards being Romeo Dobbs much more plausible. I think they just covet Dontavian Wicks skill set too much. I know he had issues with drops last year, but 4th best open scorer in terms of ESPN tracking. Like the dude is a technician, very Deontay Johnson-like in his ability to run routes. So certainly would be coveted by other teams as well. I just think that Green Bay still needs that on their roster, and Romeo Dobbs would make more sense to part with. Also, when you look at like contractually, he'll be up a year before Dontavian Wicks as well. So I would lean one of those two if you're putting me on the spot right now for that. But I will say this can also be tied into this question from Omar Khan himself. Omar Khan artist has a question here. He wants to know why we're even discussing trading resources to get a wide receiver too, when Arthur Smith is not known for using that much in his scheme. Adding someone for sure, just don't know it makes sense to part with a major resource to do so. What's your take on that?
I would somewhat disagree. I think you're looking at Atlanta's roster when he was with them for the past couple years before coming to Pittsburgh. But if you look at that Tennessee Titans team, that little duo of A.J. Brown and Corey Davis were pretty interesting, right? I mean, A.J. Brown was
Corey Davis went over 1,000 yards.
I mean, A.J. Brown was your number one alpha guy, right? DK Metcalf is going to play that role. But Corey Davis was an interesting guy. He was around 1,000 yards, I think about 5 touchdowns that year that they went on that run to the AFC title game. So I think the Steelers and Arthur Smith would very much like to have a more notable presence at that number 2 wide receiver spot. I just think Atlanta kind of lacked that during Arthur Smith's time there. But I think the Steelers and Arthur Smith are kind of trying to recreate that Titans team that he took to the AFC title game. And, they eventually lost. But, I mean, I think a lot of Steelers fans would take that this season given the last, 8 years of playoff win drought.
Yeah. And the other thing about that, which I'll add to as well, because a lot of people could push back and say that that's an anomaly. The Corey Davis one, it was 984. So you're right. Didn't quite get to 1,000, but right on the cusp of it. But in Atlanta, he had a second pass catching tight end in Jonnu Smith, which I'm not taking away from what Darnell Washington or any of the other tight ends in the roster, not named Pat Freiermuth, are, but that's not their MO. Like Darnell Washington's an extra offensive lineman who maybe you'll get out in the flat once in a while and catch a couple passes, but that's not his MO. To me, I think if you don't have that second wide receiving option, you need that second receiving tight end option to kind of fill that void. The Steelers, obviously, in my opinion, do not have either right now. For as much as I like the players on the roster to fill specific roles, that guy's not there on the roster. And I don't know that they're going to be there, even with one of the names that we're talking about, to the degree that we're hoping for. And the other part of this is, like, to me, what's a major resource? Like, now, yeah, Chris Olave for like a second round pick or whatever, that to me would be parting with a major resource. And then I think it could pay off, assuming health for Chris Olave, but we would have to see there. But if you're talking about anything less than that, I don't know. Like, because one of the Packers guys, to me, we're talking probably a 4th round pick to do so. I don't know that anybody else out there you're talking about committing a major resource to. So I guess this really is like an Olave thing, this question.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the Steelers are projected to have, what is it, I think 12 picks right now in the 2026 draft.
Yep.
I think it is very unrealistic to think that they're going to make up all those picks, right? They have accumulated all these picks in order to make moves like trading up and going to get your next franchise quarterback, or trying to find that number 2 wide receiver. So, thinking they're just going to stick and pick and kind of hold on to all these picks they've acquired, I mean, I think that's a little bit unrealistic. I think, like I said, when we were talking about Olave, I think a lot of people would be more than happy to just kind of swap George Pickens and Chris Olave. I mean, you got that 3rd round pick for Pickens. I don't know if you can net Olave for that, but if you can do a 3rd and a 5th or something like that, I think that would be intriguing to me for sure.
You know what? We should bring up this one just because we were just talking about the tight ends. I know that this is being facetious here from friend of the show, Nick Faribaugh, but he's asked if we had any Donald Parham season predictions. Hey, we have a listener that is a huge Donald Parham fan, going back to well before he was on the Steelers roster.
Okay.
For his sake, hope he makes the roster. I think he could be a very interesting tight end 3 and definitely useful in the red zone. But assuming he cracks the roster, I'd say right now, I don't know that I necessarily expect that to happen. Assuming he cracks the roster, I'll make a bold prediction and say he catches 2 touchdowns.
Okay, I like it. Let's see. So, best season was last year. He had 27 catches for 285 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not bad, right? His worst year came right before that in 2022. He only played in 6 games, but he had 10 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown. I think he will certainly be on the lower end of his career receiving yards total. So I'll go around. I'll put him right in the middle there. I'll match you at 2 touchdowns. Like you said, I think it definitely depends on him making the roster. I don't think he is anywhere near a lock to make the roster right now. But he's kind of that receiving large tight end red zone presence. So I don't think that's out of the question.
Also, shout out to my guy, Donnie Drew, in here, who asked who my favorite Arizona media member was. This is easy. I'm going to do Richie Bradshaw. No, I'm just kidding. Shout out to Donnie. Donnie, actually, we used to do a fantasy football podcast together. He used to also be under the Noah Strackbine umbrella over there, Donnie. But then now he's out there covering the Cardinals and the Suns and every team, I believe, that is in Arizona. So shout out to him doing his thing over there. Definitely didn't expect to give Donnie Drew a shout out on this podcast, but there you go, Donnie. I hope you're watching or listening based off you asking that. Let's get back to some more serious conversation. A name that we have been bringing up, obviously, on and off all offseason is Aaron Rodgers. And John wants to know if we feel like it's imperative for him to be at OTAs if he's going to be on this roster.
That's tough. I mean, from a football IQ perspective, no, right? I mean, this guy's been playing forever. I don't question his ability to come in and get himself acclimated into the offense. My worry would be just kind of building that rapport with all new targets, right? He's never played with any of these skill guys. And, whether he comes and he tries to get a guy like Alan Lazard here in Pittsburgh, we'll see, right? But as of right now and how the roster currently stands, he's never played with, guys like DK Metcalf and Pat Freiermuth and that running back core and Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. So I think the team and a lot of fans and myself would would love it if he was there, but I think mandatory minicamp is kind of a better deadline. I believe minicamp begins June 10th. I think that's more of a date we should be looking at for Rodgers coming to Pittsburgh. He's also proven to not be the biggest fan of OTAs in recent years, right? Kind of sitting that out with the Jets. So I think the team would love to have him, but I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee at this point.
Yeah, my thing goes hand in hand with the rapport thing. Like, Aaron is very detailed himself. He has like a lot of checks and stuff that he needs to get down. Like, he has a lot of specific hand gestures for his receivers and stuff that you'll see him do at the line of scrimmage a ton. So I just think for that standpoint, getting on the same page with his receivers and everybody being collectively on the same page is why I think it's imperative for him to be around as soon as possible. So, you know, I'd love to see a deal come to fruition. What's today? 16th. I'd love to be sitting here on the 17th talking about it coming to fruition and him being on the roster, but I don't know that that's going to take place. I know something was just like Mark Cabali made a prediction that he's going to be on the roster by the end of the month. I mean, I'm done making predictions. I kept doing it. I said like the Monday before the draft was like the last time that I was going to make a prediction, because I thought that they would have liked to have had, well, I'm sure they would have liked to, but I thought they would have needed to have an answer to basically decide what the draft plan was going to be for the position. Now, they did draft a quarterback in the 6th round, not as high as we expected them to get one, but certainly a name that I think you could have made the case for, even all the way up at pick 83, could have been in consideration in Will Howard. So we'll see how everything goes there. But yeah, it's not for me a matter of him picking up the offense or anything like that. It's just about being on the same page with the guys he's going to be throwing the football to, assuming that a deal does come to fruition. So Hayden says, I agree that a full tank isn't the way to rebuild in the NFL. Wouldn't it be better to maybe not try so hard to patch up the holes for a mediocre team, though, and finish around 7-10 to be better positioned for the swing at quarterback next year? Would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think a 7-10 finish is that much different than a 9-8. 10-7 or what will you be? And I think you still have to have the perspective that the Steelers are building this roster up so much to compete this year. They'll tell you they're competing this year. They compete every year, right? But they're building this roster up so that when they get that rookie quarterback, it is setting himself up with the best chance to have success. And if you have a chance to get a guy like Chris Olave this offseason, I think you do it because there's no guarantee that that's going to be the case next year, next offseason. I mean, say a guy like Tyler Shuck, wins that starting job in New Orleans and he absolutely lights it up this year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if that happens, they're going to hold on to a guy like Chris Olave. So I think you have to keep the big picture perspective, and I think that's exactly what the Steelers are doing right now. And like Olave, I think you pounce on that opportunity for the right price.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I understand there's like two schools of thought here in terms of the direction. We've debated this so many times in terms of like, to tank, people think it sounds good in theory, and then all of a sudden you just have the first overall pick. But like, what had to happen to get to that point?
Right.
Like, how many guys have to fall off a cliff? And then that's obviously a much bigger problem beyond just it being a bad record for one season. Did anybody suffer a major injury? How's that going to carry over? Just from a morale standpoint, all of a sudden, like, does TJ Watt not want to be here if they have a type of season like that? Does Cam Hayward then retire if they have a season like that? Like, what happens if they have a season like people are talking about, just the bottom completely falling out from a roster construction standpoint? Hayden's not suggesting that, by the way. He's just talking about the middle ground here, which I understand can be incredibly frustrating. But like, we've seen, the Steelers are trying to do something that we don't see a ton, which is like being competitive while retooling. But like, if they can pull it off in a couple of years, if they hit on the quarterback, this could be the biggest thing. We're going to be talking about what an incredible job they were able to do, like competing and even at times making the playoffs while not having the answer at quarterback and retooling this roster. Which again, I don't think they need to bottom out to do. I think it honestly benefits them the way that next year's quarterback class looks like it could be. because you have so many different options. You don't need to get up to one. You don't need to get even maybe into the top 5. Like, as long as they have the capital to be able to get into the like top 10 to 12, they're going to be able to land a guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Hayden said, I mean, if he's looking at it from the perspective that if the Steelers don't add anyone else from this point, that the Steelers could go 6-11, 7-10. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. The Steelers team is still very talented. Mike Tomlin has won a lot of games with a much worse roster, right? And 2019 he had Mason Rudolph, but I think Rudolph is obviously developed and is a better player at this point of his career. Devlin Hodges was a part of that team. This team isn't, just a bunch of bums. And like you said, I think if that kind of record is the finish in this year, I think there's a lot deeper rooted issues that are going on. And then you're going to need to kind of stick and pick and use all 12 of those and hope you can hit all across the board, which I mean is not
honestly,
easy
we might be talking about, like, does it even make sense to take a quarterback, like, if that happens, because of the state of the roster and what it could look like if things all go south, like they would need to for the roster to bottom out. So we'll see on that. But just in terms of that, I think that's a good segue to this. I do have one more question, but I'll save it to the end because this is a good point to bring this in. You've seen, Dan Orlovsky on ESPN talk about, like, this team's going to start out 0-6. I don't even want to say his name. Adam Shine talking about them 100% guarantee they're going to have a losing season this year, which is like, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th year that he's done this, where he's predicted this to happen in a row. So it's a constant thing for him. Eventually he's going to be right, probably. But just when you keep predicting it every single year and it doesn't happen, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. What do we make of this? What's your take on the state of the team as it stands right now? And fair or not, should we be baking in the idea that just assuming Aaron Rodgers is going to be on this team?
I mean, I am. Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, Art Rooney, they're all acting like Rodgers is going to be a part of this team. So I think if that falls through, I think they deserve some of the scrutiny that's headed their way for putting all their eggs in that basket. But listen, Rodgers' options are Steelers or retirement. I really think that. I know the Saints have kind of been brought up a little bit after Derek Carr's kind of surprise retirement, but I think they still want to give Tyler Shuck, who they drafted in the 2nd round, and Spencer Rattler and Hayner the opportunity to kind of see what they are there. So I still think for Rodgers, it's Steelers or retirement, and he very well could still retire, but I'm still moving forward with the idea that Rodgers is going to be a part of this team. And if you put Rodgers into this team, no, they're not a Super Bowl contender, but they are very much in that Mike Tomlin realm of non-losing season. I think they can easily go 9-8, 10-7, be right on the verge of the playoffs, potentially make it. And I mean, best case scenario would be that they finally end that win drought. But all this talk of, finally guaranteeing that the Steelers are going to have that losing season, and Orlovsky saying they're going to start 0-6. I mean, I think it's just ridiculous. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Dan. Actually, I had the opportunity to have him on the podcast last year leading up to the draft. Really weird happenstance where, we ended up interacting on social media, said he should jump on. So he did. But yeah, I love Dan, but like way off base here, in my opinion. And maybe it's because he's a former quarterback. To me, he's just treating it like the conversation is all about quarterback versus quarterback, and the team with a better quarterback wins every single football game, which is not the case. So I think way off base with that take there. And again, I don't even want to give the other guy much of a thought here in terms of this, but I haven't put this take out there, and like offensive headlines have really dominated this thing here just because we are waiting on that Aaron Rodgers domino. From a defensive standpoint, I'm going to say it right now. I think they are a better team on defense than they were last year. I think Darius Slay is better than Dante Jackson. I think 2nd year of Peyton Wilson in this offense, 2nd year of Patrick Queen learning the defense. They just spent a 1st round pick on the defensive line, and Derek Harmon, who I think is a better player than what they were getting from Larry Ogunjobi. So I think from a defensive standpoint, we're not talking enough about how I think there's going to be at least a slight leap in terms of what they are on that side of the football.
No, I agree 100%. And, you have a guy like Deshaun Elliott who's, looking to get paid. He's going into the final year of his his deal he signed here in Pittsburgh. So I know he's going to show up this season and try to replicate what he did last year. I mean, arguably one of the best free agent signings of last offseason all
Sure.
around the league. And, continuing to pair up with Minka in that secondary, like you said, the addition of Darius Slay, I think I love Dante Jackson. I love talking with him in the locker room, but I think Slay is a big upgrade at that position. Kind of gives the Steelers the opportunity to just let Slay and Porter play where they're at, their side of the field. They don't need Porter to necessarily follow guys like he has. And like you said, adding that big first rounder and Derek Harmon on that front, to learn from Cam Hayward and potentially take over for him eventually. I think that defense, for sure hasn't been talked enough about. And it's just been the Aaron Rodgers offseason, but I think they'll have a chance to make a name for themselves this season.
And last thing before we get out of here, Aaron, DJ TJ Bird. Yes, their DJ Thomas Jr. does have a fan account already on Twitter,
There
which
we
I
go.
appreciate. And his question relates to just that. Who do we feel like is the UDFA with the best chance of making the Steelers roster? I actually think there's a couple that have there's one that I feel like has a very good chance, but there's a couple that I think could. What's your thought?
Yeah, I'll go one each side of the ball. Offense, Rock Taylor. Big time, big size receiver. The Steelers obviously have a need right there. I think he's going to be given an opportunity in camp to make a name for himself and kind of find a roster spot. Like I said, I'm sure the Steelers are going to look to add to that room, and there's going to be more competition coming his way. But if he shows out, I think a roster spot is very much in the cards for him. And then defensively, Sebastian Castro. He was probably my favorite UDFA pickup by the Steelers.
Yeah.
Obviously, the unfortunate medical retirement by Ryan Watts kind of opens up another slot for him. I know they added Juan Thornhill, but he's just a 1-year deal there. And, Castro definitely has some upside there. I didn't think he was going to go undrafted. So I think it was awesome that the Steelers were able to nab him right after the draft. And I think he definitely brings a physicality at safety, and he plays some of that nickel. It'll be interesting to see if he can find himself into a way of a roster spot as well.
He wasn't as good in 24 as he was in 23, and I don't know if injuries were part of that or what, but thought still he was a day 3 pick, and the fact that he went undrafted, obviously to the benefit of the Steelers, I don't want to say makes up for it, because it's not like I don't know what these guys are going to be, but like spending 7th round picks on Carson Bruner and Dante Kent to then get some, like you could have swapped those, and I think it would have made much more sense on paper. So Sebastian Castro is the one that I said, like, easy to me to find that spot, especially with Ryan Watts medically retiring from the game of football, because Castro can play in the slot too, like not just looking at him as a safety. There's opportunities for him as a slot corner as well, which makes sense. Same direction on offense in terms of Rock Taylor. Like if they don't add another receiver right now, and they end up carrying 6, he could certainly push Scotty Miller off the roster, in my opinion. There's so much redundancy on that roster with what they have, and he's a different type there. I'll even give, the person that asked this question, DJ Thomas Jr., a shout out here, just because if they're looking for something different and they part ways with it, like this is who's going to push Connor Hayward potentially off the roster, is a guy like this. So we'll see. Very intriguing, great athlete that can do some fullback, H-back, wing, tight end stuff. So we'll see if he's going to be able to push for a roster spot as well. But very intriguing, undrafted free agent, or even like obviously the guys they brought in for rookie camp and stuff, and end up signing Trey Sermon out of that, as well as an offensive lineman, and actually another running back. But we'll see, what to make of that. But just in terms of this UDFA class, there's a couple interesting guys, and I'm curious to see how many of them actually push for 53s.
Yeah. I think Arthur Smith would like to kind of get that full back. And, I think DJ Thomas Jones could potentially be that. Connor Hayward, is he going into the final year of his rookie deal, or does he have 2 left?
He would have been, this would be the last year, I believe. Yeah, 22, 23, 24.
Last year. So the Steelers, if they're not kind of seeing Connor Hayward in their future plans, could be looking to get a different version of him. And, it should be interesting. I'm definitely more excited for this undrafted free agent class, more so than previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. Which makes for a fun training camp to cover, fun preseason, all that good stuff. And we'll be looking forward to Aaron's coverage on the site throughout all of it. Aaron, before we get out of here, tell the people where you can find you.
Twitter X at Aaron_M_Becker. And you can find all my written work at SteelersNow.com.
There we go. And be sure to subscribe to SN Plus to get a shout out on here, all the stuff you get over there, an ad-free experience. And then once a month, we've been doing the live streams and having a lot of fun with that with you guys in the chat as well. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you were here on YouTube, hit us in the comments, your thoughts, anything we talked about today, a question for a future episode when we come back over the weekend. Alan, we'll be back on Monday with myself. Look forward to that conversation. If you listen somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere as Zachary Smith, PGH. For Aaron Becker and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.